Guideline issuing bodies in the US and Europe recommend that the nutrient choline be supplemented in patients receiving parenteral nutrition, but no commercial IV choline product is yet available. I spoke to Jesse Shefferman, CEO of Protara Therapeutics, about the company's strategy for developing a product to meet that need. Last time you and I spoke, we talked about TARA-002 for non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. Let's talk about your IV choline program.
Sure. So choline is a phospholipid substrate replacement therapy for patients who are on parenteral support. Frankly, parenteral support is a modern medical miracle. Effectively, it is a way for patients who have lost the function to digest food through their small intestine to absorb nutrients in a manner that sustains life. In the late 1980s, physicians and scientists devised a way to provide macronutrients and micronutrients to patients in that state through an intravenous infusion of nutrients. By sort of its very nature, that is a highly kind of perturbed way to introduce nutrients to those vital organs, right? And so what we see with patients that are on parenteral support is that there are various sort of building blocks of cellular structures that you and I get from food that they are unable to get or process in the same way that you and I are able to. Choline is a significant methyl donor, so it donates methyl groups, which are important in sort of transit and transport and construction of lipids and lipid-like structures in the body. Phosphatidylcholine is one of the most ubiquitous, and patients on parenteral support do not get enough choline exogenously to synthesize phosphatidylcholine over time. So we're simply replacing for these patients the choline that they're not getting that you and I would get through oral intake.
How many people in the US are on parenteral support?
We estimate that there's about 30,000 patients who are adults and about 5,000 patients who are children that are on that sort of long-term parenteral support. What we know from our own observational study that we conducted in 22 through 24, Thrive 1, where we, basically took a look at serum choline concentrations of approximately 88 patients that were on parenteral support. Approximately 80% of those patients were deemed choline deficient.
What are their options now for supplementing choline? What's on the market now, and what's the need you're trying to fill?
To answer your question, there is no choline replacement therapy on the market now. And so what you see physicians doing is try to manage the downstream consequences of choline deficiency. We see physicians trying to manage lipid intake to slow the progression or prevent the sort of onset of the liver manifestations. But there are other manifestations, muscle wasting, bone wasting, difficulty breathing, brain fog.
I'd like to go back a little bit. Could you talk a little bit more about the different conditions that could wind up putting somebody on parenteral support?
Yeah. So the big ones are, gastric cancers, ulcerative colitis is a very big one, pseudo-obstruction, bowel perforation. There are approximately 12, to 13 different sort of underlying disease states that can result in long-term parenteral support. The big ones, though, you can imagine are ulcerative colitis, cancer, some gunshot wounds. Some patients are born with a, genetically short bowel. So, short bowel syndrome is the 8th most prevalent of the underlying diseases that contribute to the need for parenteral support. So, short bowel is fairly well known to the biotech community, and the fact that it's only the 8th largest underlying contributing factor to parenteral support should give a sense of how large this addressable market is.
The American Society for Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition and the European Society for Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism both already recommend IV choline for patients on parenteral support, but there isn't any option for that right now. Is that right?
Yeah, it's fairly unique to have guidelines include a recommendation for a product that's not approved. And look, I think this speaks to the likely acceptance of IV choline replacement therapy, the association of choline deficiency in parenteral support patients with liver injury and other, sort of organ damage is already pretty well understood.
Can you talk a little bit more about where Protara is with your development of your IV choline?
We've worked closely with FDA to develop a phase 3 program that can work to both look at just sort of, are we effectively replacing serum, choline in serum, and then as a secondary endpoint, we're looking at some of these clinical manifestations of parenteral support patients. But right now we are commencing enrollment of our phase 3 study, which is a phase 2B seamless design into a phase 3, where we will confirm the dose in 24 patients and then roll seamlessly into a 130 patient randomized controlled study versus placebo. And that's been confirmed by FDA to be sufficient for registration. In the phase 2 study, which looked at 15 patients, 8 on active, 7 on placebo, we saw a pretty significant increase in serum choline concentrations by week 2 of a 12-week study. So that's our primary endpoint. In addition, we're looking at a number of clinical endpoints, many of them associated with liver injury, liver function. And again, in the phase 2 study, we saw pretty significant improvement in biomarkers that are reflective of liver injury, whether that be fat in the liver, alkaline phosphatase levels, or, canonical liver function tests. We are already experiencing a lot of demand to enroll in the study. You can imagine the basic blocking and tackling of getting a, registrational study that's international in scope, getting that up and running, across hospitals in Europe and in the United States and what have you. That's a pretty big undertaking. And we're very grateful that we're doing that site setup and study startup into a setting that is already very much attuned to the need for this product.